She held her ground, never imagining the ripple effect her refusal would create. The subway car, an early morning cocoon of tired sighs and rustling papers, hummed its usual tune. It was a typical weekday in Washington, D.C., the DuPont Circle platform already a swirling eddy of commuters, each person vying for a sliver of serenity in the urban churn. Among them Layla, a 14-year-old, her backpack a familiar weight, earbuds tucked away. To most she was unremarkable, just another student probably mentally reviewing algebra. Yet today she'd become the silent focal point of an unforgettable drama. When the train doors slid open, Layla stepped in, her gaze sweeping the packed carriage for an open spot. Her eyes landed on an unclaimed seat, nestled between two strangers. It lay vacant, save for the large purse on the middle-aged woman beside it. Layla approached, a polite smile on her face. "Excuse me, ma'am, is this seat available?" The woman barely acknowledged her. "It's taken," she snapped, yanking the purse closer as if Layla's very presence was an intrusion. The tension was immediate, a palpable current that silently rippled through the crowd. Layla hesitated, glancing around. Other passengers shifted uneasily, faces etched with a mix of concern and discomfort, but no one intervened. Layla stood firm. "There's no one here," she said softly, her voice just strong enough to puncture the quiet. The woman's lips thinned, her voice escalating slightly. "I said it's taken. Find another seat." Layla remained. She wasn't seeking conflict, but an inner resolve prevented her from yielding. It wasn't merely about the seat. It was about the deeper meaning of this interaction. Still, she offered no further argument. She simply stood, the silent weight of her conviction more potent than any verbal protest. The subway car had transformed into an impromptu stage. Unbeknownst to Layla, someone had already started recording. "What seems to be the issue?" a nearby man finally inquired, his tone not aggressive but laced with quiet authority. The woman bristled, her glare shifting to him. "It's my seat and I decide who sits here." Her voice was sharp, defensive, yet her words inadvertently revealed more than she intended. Passengers exchanged glances. Some startled, others simply weary of this all-too-familiar display. A hushed silence hung in the air, but their subtle body language spoke volumes. Layla's cheeks flushed, but her gaze held steady. She stood tall, backpack still slung over her shoulder, waiting. The train lurched forward, yet the moment felt suspended, as if time itself paused to capture every detail. This was just the prologue. This quiet standoff felt different, the air charged with an unspoken certainty that this encounter wouldn't simply fade away. The subway car swayed gently through the tunnels, but the atmosphere inside remained thick. Passengers who had initially avoided eye contact now openly observed the escalating scene. Layla's calm, unwavering presence was a silent challenge to the woman's claim over that empty seat. But the woman, later identified as Cynthia, wasn't relenting. "I don't know why you're still standing there," Cynthia muttered, her voice dripping with annoyance. "There are plenty of other places to stand." Layla didn't immediately reply. Her expression stayed composed, but the faint tremor in her fingers gripping her backpack strap hinted at her inner strain. She took a subtle step back, not a retreat but creating just enough personal space. A young man across the aisle stirred, pulling out his phone. His screen mirrored the scene. Cynthia's rigid posture, her purse clutched like a shield, and Layla's steadfast stance. His thumbs moved swiftly, quietly capturing the moment. "Seriously?" Cynthia hissed, noticing the phone. "You're recording this? For what?" "For accountability," the young man retorted, his tone casual but with an underlying edge. "People should see this." Cynthia scoffed, crossing her arms. "See what?" A spoiled teenager demanding her way. That remark struck a nerve. A woman a few seats down, dressed in scrubs, finally spoke up. "It's not about the seat. It's about how you're treating her." The tension shifted again, like ice cracking underfoot. Cynthia's gaze darted around, seeking an ally, but most passengers either avoided her eyes or met them with quiet disapproval. Her face flushed with a mixture of anger and mortification. Layla took a deep breath. "I didn't mean to cause trouble," she said softly, her voice steady despite the tremor she felt inside. "I just wanted to sit down." Her words were simple, yet carried a weight that momentarily silenced the murmurs in the car. For an instant it seemed the confrontation might diffuse. But Cynthia wasn't ready to let it go. This generation, she muttered loudly, shaking her head. No respect, no patience. Always playing the victim. Layla's jaw tightened, but she remained silent. The young man with the phone, however, wasn't letting it pass. You're the only one causing a scene, he said, his voice louder now. Just let her sit. The subway car jolted, pulling into the next station. A few passengers disembarked, but more eyes joined the impromptu audience as new riders stepped on. Layla hesitated, then made a decision. She turned, moving toward a pole for balance. But before she reached it, a woman in a business suit who had been quietly observing stood up. Take my seat, she said, her voice firm but kind. You deserve better than this. Layla nodded her thanks, sinking into the seat with quiet relief. But the story was far from over. As the train doors closed and it rumbled onward, the tension lingered. Cynthia's defiant posture remained, and the young man continued filming, now narrating in a low voice, detailing the scene for those who would soon watch it online. The silence that followed felt more profound. It wasn't just the quiet of a train car. It was the hush before a storm, the moment when seeds are sown, waiting to blossom into something far larger. The train arrived at its final destination, passengers spilling onto the platform, the morning rush carrying them toward their various pursuits. Layla blended into the crowd, her day continuing as if nothing extraordinary had occurred. Cynthia, conversely, hurried away, her purse clutched tightly, oblivious to the digital storm brewing. By lunchtime, the video was already circulating on social media. It began small, shared by a handful of eyewitnesses. But as the hours ticked by, the clip gained unstoppable momentum. Hashtags materialized. Hashtag Subway Showdown, hashtag Accountability Matters, hashtag Respect All. Cynthia's face was unmistakable in the footage. Her sharp words, her dismissive tone, her steadfast refusal to move her purse. Comments flooded in. Some scathing, others measured but no less critical. This is the kind of behavior that holds us back. Disgraceful. Good for that girl, she handled herself with such poise. I've seen this woman on my commute before, always so entitled. By evening, Cynthia's name was trending. Someone recognized her from a community Facebook group, linking her profile to the post. Within hours, her entire online life was laid bare. Pictures of family vacations, gardening posts, even a few political rants. It was all exposed. Cynthia first realized the magnitude when her phone began vibrating relentlessly. Texts from friends, emails from colleagues, missed calls from unknown numbers. Confused, she opened her social media accounts and froze. The comments were merciless. Some directly condemned her, while others shared the video with captions leaving no room for misinterpretation. She scrolled through the responses, her heart hammering. Is this what we've become? She muttered aloud, slamming her phone down. To her, it felt like an overreaction, an invasion of privacy. I was protecting my space, she insisted to herself, but the words felt hollow even to her own ears. The backlash spilled into her real life. The next day at her job as a legal secretary, whispers followed her through the hallways. A meeting with her manager left her shaken. Clients were complaining. The firm couldn't tolerate the negative publicity. Cynthia was told to take a leave of absence until the situation subsided. At the grocery store, she felt lingering eyes on her. A woman in line whispered something to her companion, loud enough for Cynthia to catch the words. That subway lady. Embarrassment morphed into anger as she rushed out, abandoning her cart. Her family wasn't spared. Her daughter, a college student, called in tears, begging Cynthia to delete her social media accounts. Mom, why couldn't you just let her sit? She asked, the disappointment cutting deeper than any online comment. 4 days, Cynthia remained cloistered in her home, blinds drawn, TV off, the outside world feeling like a hostile force. She replayed the incident repeatedly, attempting to justify her actions. But the more she pondered, the harder it became to cling to her sense of righteousness. Yet the anger she felt wasn't solely about the video. It was about the mirror it held up to her. As days bled into a week, she could no longer ignore the reflection staring back. For Layla, the morning subway incident was a fleeting moment, awkward and uncomfortable but not entirely unfamiliar. She had encountered dismissive behavior before, though it rarely left such a lasting impression. By the time she arrived at school, she had pushed it to the back of her mind, focusing instead on a science quiz and a lunchtime debate with friends about chip flavors. It wasn't until later that evening, curled on the couch with her mom, scrolling through her phone, that the full weight of the moment came flooding back. A notification popped up, a tagged post from a classmate. Curious, she clicked. The caption read, "Look at this queen staying calm under pressure," followed by several fire emojis. Layla froze as the video began to play. There she was, standing in the subway car, her quiet defiance captured from multiple angles. Her heart pounded as she watched the scene unfold, her voice barely audible but unmistakably steady. The comments beneath the video were overwhelming, a cascade of praise for her composure, condemnation for the woman's behavior, and stories from others who had faced similar experiences. Wow, such grace for someone so young. This young girl is going to change the world someday. Reminds me of something that happened to me last year. I wish I'd been as brave. Layla's mom, sitting nearby, noticed her reaction. "What's wrong, sweetie?" she asked, leaning over to glance at the screen. Her eyes widened as she took in the video and its rapidly climbing view count. "Is that you?" Layla nodded slowly, her face a mixture of surprise and unease. "I didn't even know someone was filming." Her mom placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "You handled yourself beautifully. I'm proud of you." But pride wasn't the sole emotion Layla felt. As the video continued its viral spread, she found herself inundated with messages. Some from supportive strangers, others from classmates who suddenly wanted to be her best friend. Even a local reporter reached out requesting an interview. Layla wasn't sure how to feel. On one hand, she was grateful for the kindness and encouragement. On the other, she felt exposed, as if a private moment had been transformed into a spectacle. She had always been reserved, preferring to express herself through writing rather than speaking. Now people looked to her for answers, for leadership, for something she wasn't sure she could provide. One evening, as she sat at her desk staring at a blank page in her notebook, her mom gently knocked on the door. "You okay?" she asked, stepping inside. "I don't know what to say," Layla admitted. "Everyone's expecting me to, I don't know, do something." Her mom sat on the bed, nodding thoughtfully. "You don't have to do anything you're not ready for. But if you feel like this is an opportunity to say something meaningful, then speak your truth. People are listening because you stood up for yourself. That's powerful." The words resonated with Layla long after her mom left the room. That night she began to write, not for the public but for herself. She wrote about the subway, the tension she felt, and the moment she decided not to yield. She wrote about what it meant to be seen, to be heard, and to stand tall even when the world tried to diminish her. But what began as a private reflection soon blossomed into something more. Her words, once confined to her notebook, found their way to a wider audience, sparking conversations she never imagined she'd be part of. The video of the subway altercation continued its spread, transcending social media platforms and igniting fervent discussions on talk shows, podcasts, and community forums. It was no longer just about Cynthia or Layla. It was about the countless similar moments that went unnoticed, unrecorded, or unspoken. Layla's words, shared in a post her mom encouraged her to upload, struck a profound chord. "Sometimes standing still is the loudest thing you can do," she wrote. Her post wasn't lengthy, but it carried a quiet power that resonated with thousands. Stories began to pour in, each unique, but all carrying the same undercurrent of resilience in the face of prejudice. A man in California wrote about being refused service at a diner in the 1970s, and how he never spoke up but wished he had. A teenage girl from Texas shared a moment in her school cafeteria when she was told to leave a table because her kind didn't belong there. The narratives weren't always overtly dramatic, but they were real, painting a vivid picture of a society still grappling with the weight of its biases. Cynthia, meanwhile, observed this wave of accountability with growing unease. At first she tried to dismiss it as mob mentality. But as she read some of the stories connected to Layla's post, something within her shifted. These weren't just random strangers airing grievances. They were human beings whose experiences mirrored her actions in ways she hadn't allowed herself to consider. One afternoon, while scrolling through the latest comments, Cynthia paused on a video. It was a clip of Layla reading an excerpt from her writing at a local community event. Her voice was steady, her words clear and thoughtful. "I didn't want to be a symbol," Layla said. "I just wanted to sit." But sometimes what we want doesn't matter as much as what we need to do. I stood still because I couldn't move forward otherwise. And maybe that's something we all need to think about. When to stand, when to sit, and when to make room for someone else. Cynthia felt a lump in her throat as she closed her laptop. For the first time, she allowed herself to truly reflect on what had occurred. Not just the subway incident, but the years of small choices and assumptions that had led her to that moment. It wasn't an easy realization, and it didn't come with instant solutions, but it was a beginning. In the weeks that followed, Cynthia reached out to Layla through a mutual acquaintance. It wasn't an apology exactly, but a gesture, a willingness to learn and listen. Layla, ever thoughtful, agreed to meet her, but only after making it clear that forgiveness wasn't synonymous with forgetting. Their conversation was brief but meaningful, planting seeds of understanding that neither could have imagined on that crowded subway car. But the real transformation wasn't solely within Cynthia or Layla. It was in the ripple effect their story created, urging others to confront their biases, share their truths, and take steps toward a world where everyone has a seat. Weeks stretched into months, but the impact of that subway encounter continued to reverberate. Layla's voice became a quiet but persistent force in discussions about respect and accountability. She didn't seek fame, but her words became a touchstone for those striving to challenge ingrained biases and build bridges where walls once stood. Her story was featured in a local newspaper, then on a national morning show. Each time she was asked about that moment, she offered the same reflection. It wasn't about making a statement. It was about standing in my truth. If that helps someone else, then I'm glad. For Cynthia, the path forward was less public but no less transformative. She began attending workshops on implicit bias and volunteering at a local community center. The first time she walked into one of those meetings, she felt small and exposed, as if everyone could see the version of herself she was striving to leave behind. But she stayed, listening and learning, taking each step as it came. One day, while organizing books for a community library program, she discovered a notebook filled with handwritten stories from local teens. One of them was Layla's. In her words, Cynthia saw not just the girl she had dismissed, but the immense courage it took to stand still in the face of dismissal. For the first time in a long time, she felt hope, not just for Layla or herself, but for what could happen when people choose to confront their own reflections and embrace change. The broader impact of their story wasn't quantifiable in hashtags or views, but in the small, quiet ways it shifted the world. In classrooms, children spoke openly about fairness and kindness. On subways, passengers were more inclined to offer their seats without hesitation. And in countless homes, families shared long-hidden stories, finding healing in the telling. At a community event months later, Layla stood at a microphone, her notebook in hand. She read a new piece, one that reflected her journey and the unexpected role she had come to embrace. Sometimes the hardest thing is to speak up, she read. Other times the hardest thing is to stand still and let the silence speak for you. But either way, the courage to face what's wrong and make it right is what changes the world. She looked out at the crowd, her eyes meeting Cynthia's. The older woman offered a small, tentative nod. It wasn't much, but for now it was enough. As the event concluded, Layla stepped off the stage, surrounded by her family and friends. She smiled, feeling a sense of peace she hadn't anticipated. Her story wasn't over. It was just one thread in a larger conversation that would continue to grow. And for everyone who heard it, the message was clear. The smallest actions, the quietest stands, and the simplest truths could ripple outward and make an undeniable difference. Stories like Layla's powerfully remind us of the strength of kindness, the imperative of accountability, and the quiet courage in everyday life. If this narrative resonated with you, take a moment to consider how you can create space for others, speak up when it truly matters, and challenge the inherent biases we all carry. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories that ignite change, because together we can build a more just world, one meaningful moment at a time.